Hello everyone, my name is Colton and I'm going to show you the Java solution for Advent of Code 2023 for day 2, part 1. If you don't know what Advent of Code is, it's basically like an Advent calendar. So if you ever as a kid got some kind of box and you opened one little portion of it each day all the way up until Christmas and there was like a little chocolate in there or something, that's basically an Advent calendar. But instead for Advent of Code, there's just a problem that comes out every single day leading up to Christmas. So therefore we get Advent of Code. And so really you don't need any kind of CS background. As long as you just have some problem solving skills like this says right here, you should be good to go. But anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. So you've been launched into the sky from the trebuchet and you land on some kind of island and you need to get somewhere, and you meet an elf and he's going to take you to some place, but along the way you're going to play a few games with him. And the game is basically has either red, green, or blue cubes in his bag, and then he pulls out a random amount, and then you just need to determine a few things. So for example, we have game 1 and the elf pulls out 3 blue cubes, 4 red, and that's it. He didn't pull out any green, and that's about it. And then within games, there are rounds. So after the first round, then he pulls out 1 red, 2 green, and 6 blue. And then there is another round, which is just only 2 green. So the end goal of this is to get the game ID and sum it up, pertaining only to if the game is possible. So right here says the elf would first like to know which games would have been possible if the bag contained only 12 red cubes, 13 green cubes, and 14 blue. Well, right here we can tell in round 1, first we need to check every single round really. We're going to say, is 3 less than the 14? Yes. 4 less than the 12? Yes. And then we keep on going. But so overall, game 1 and game 2 are completely valid. But then we get to game 3 and we see 8 green, 6 blue, which are both valid numbers, but then we get to 20 red and that invalidates it, because what if the bag only contained 12 cubes? Well, 20 red makes this an invalid game. So we don't even need to check any of the other rounds. This invalidates it. Same goes for game 4. Although round 1 is secured and round 2 is fine, we get to round 3 and we see that there's 15 blue, and our constraint though is 14 blue cubes, so that invalidates it. And then the end goal is to just sum up all the game IDs that would have been valid. So we would get 1 plus 2, which is 3, and then game 5 was also a valid game, which then makes it 8. And so there we go. That is the answer. So now our task is to have the same exact constraint, but with a larger text file. So again, we needed to determine which games would have been possible if the bag had been loaded with only 12 red, 13 green, and 14 blue, and then get the sum of those IDs of those games. So now over here in IntelliJ, we have some input. I went ahead and copied over the test input that they gave us, and then here's the real input, which includes 100 games. If we analyze this just a little bit more though, we'll see that we have a game that has some sort of number, and then there are rounds associated with every single game, and that is of variable length. And we also don't know if every round is going to have all RGB values. So what we can do here is go ahead and create a game class. So this is going to use a little bit of class structure in this, which makes it easier on us as the programmer. And so it's a good thing that we're using Java for this. So every game is going to have an ID. So we'll say int ID, and then also every game is going to have some sort of mapping of green to an integer, red to an integer, and blue to an integer. So we can go ahead and have an array list, or sorry, not arrays, an array list of hash maps. And each hash map is going to contain a string and color, which would be an integer. Sorry, every hash map in this is going to contain the string, which is the color, and then an integer, which is the amount that we have. And so we're just going to call this colors, and then we'll just end it there. But we aren't done yet. We also need to make some sort of constructor with this. So if we just do a command N and then a constructor, we only want to create a game with just an ID, and then we'll go ahead and just initialize the colors array list, but we won't do anything with it here in the constructor. So we can just say colors, or really I like to say this dot colors, but we could also just say colors. But anyway, this dot colors is equal to a new array list. And so there we go. We finished our game class. So now that we have our game class, we can go ahead and start reading in all the lines from the file. So here we'll just create this in an entirely separate method. That's how really a lot of this solution is going to run. So it'll be a public static method that's going to return an array list of strings, and we'll call it read file given a string file name. And in this, we're just going to use a try with resources block here. So try with a buffered reader named br, which is equal to a new buffered reader given a new file reader with the file name. Then we'll create a string line that's equal to br.readline, which just represents the very first line that we've read. Then we'll have a while loop that says while line is not equal to null. Then we'll just say line is going to append to some array list. So we need to create that array list. So array list that holds strings, and we'll just call it the file, which is equal to a new array list here. And we also need to go ahead and catch an exception. So that can just be IO exception and just print out the stack trace in case anything goes wrong. But here, well, let's go ahead and say file.add the line and then update line. So, line will equal br.readline again, just to update it. And so that should be our read file method. So up here in our main method, we can just say array list of strings, which we'll just call file up here too, is going to be equal to read file given our input.txt. So if we copy the source or the path from the content root or whatever, we should be good. And so there we go, we have our read file. But we also know that we're eventually going to need to have some sort of sum. So let's go ahead and create an int sum here and set that equal to 0. And actually one small issue that we had here is we didn't return the array list, so we'll go ahead and do return file. Our next method is going to be parsing every single line that we have in this file. So let's go ahead and create a new method, public static, and we're going to return an array list of games, and we'll call this parse games, or parse game. And in here, we're going to take in an array list of strings. So an array list of strings, which is just going to be the file that we had. So string file, and open this up. And now let's go ahead and create something that we're eventually going to return. So down here, we'll just say return games, but then up here, we'll say array list of games called games is equal to a new array list. And so that's just setting up the very general skeleton of what's going on here. Now we're going to have an enhanced for loop that's going to iterate over all the lines in this file. So for string line that is in file, we need to do something with every single line. So let's first try to extract the game number out of this line. So if we go ahead and create a string array called game split, there's really no good way of naming this, but this is as good as it's going to get. So we can say line.split with a colon space, and then we can assign int game ID is equal to game split at 0. And so let's take a look over here. Or first, we really need to change this to not game split, or sorry, it'll be game split at 0, which just holds the game and number. So this isn't necessarily correct yet, but what we've done here is we split the right side to index 1, and then the left side of this will be the entire string game 1. And so back over in our method, now that we have the game split, we now just need to go ahead and call game split at 0, and then we're going to split on this string. So split off of the space and then grab the 1 index. And so this is kind of a convoluted piece of code right here, but we just need to go ahead and wrap that inside of an integer.parseInt. And then there we go. That should be the number. Now let's go ahead and confirm this. So let's go ahead and do a print line here and just print out the game ID. This should just be in ascending order 1 through 100. So if we go ahead and just call parse games given the file and we run this, we should get 1 through 100. And so there we go, 1 through 100 is printed to the screen. So we're grabbing the game IDs correctly. Next, we need to go ahead and do a little bit more code. But right now we can go ahead and create a new game. So game is equal to a new game past the game ID, which this is going to initialize an array list of hash maps for us, which is representing every single round that is within this game. So now we need to go ahead and start splitting up by the rounds. So a string array called rounds is equal to the game split at 1, so that's all the rounds, and then we're going to split this off of a semicolon and a space. Now this is a little complicated, but again, just look at it here. We have a single round right here, and then we see that it's getting split by the semicolon and then a space, and then another round, semicolon, space, so on and so forth. So now we can go ahead and iterate through all the rounds that we have here. So let's go ahead and separate that, and we'll say for string round in rounds, another split, and create a hash map here that's going to represent the current round. So hash map, that's mapping a string to an integer, and we'll call this I guess color amounts is equal to a new hash map, and we won't do anything with it yet, but now we can go ahead and split. So we'll go ahead and say string array, and we'll call this color or colors, which is equal to the round dot split off of the comma and the space. And so now we're extracting this part, or really, so we're splitting off of this. So 14 green and 8 blue are going to be two separate indices in this section. And so now we just need to iterate through all the colors that we have within a round. So for string color that is in colors, we then need to split color again. So int amount is going to be equal to color dot split off of the space that's going to be within it, and then grab the index 1. But this isn't good because split returns to us some string array, and if we're just grabbing an index, we're getting a string. So we need to go ahead and wrap this within an integer.parseInt. So pass that right there, and then we do something very similar to this for just color. So we'll say string color is equal to the color dot split with the space, and then grab index 0, and we should be good. But we can't call this color, so we can just call it a color string, I guess is good enough. And then there we go. Now we just need to go ahead and put this color and its amount into the hash map. So we can say color amounts dot put, and then we can say the color string and its amount, and we should be good to go. So now this round is complete. So we need to call on the game that we have, and we can say game dot rounds dot add our round, or sorry, our color amounts, which is just representing the round. And once we fall out of iterating over all the rounds, that means that a single game is complete. So then we can go up to our games array list and say games dot add game. And this should go ahead and complete our parse games method. So back up in our main method, here is just demonstrating what the first game looks like in our input.txt. So we're going to print out an arrays.toString, and this is just going to parse the games.getZero, so get the very first game, get its rounds, and turn that into an array. So let's go ahead and take out that extra print line right here, click play, and we get a bit of an error. So down here, we have a number format exception for input string on green on line 47. If we go down here, oh, okay, because I swapped the color string and the amount. So the amount comes before the color string. That's the small issue here. So actually what we can do here is just swap this down to here and then have string color string up there. And then we also need to, oh, wait, hold on. So what we need to do down here is just swap the indices that we are looking at from 0 to 1, and then we're good to go. So if we rerun this, we'll go ahead and get the very first game that happens. So we have red 9, 14, and then 8, or really, so let's just think of this in RGB. So 9, 14, 8, and we go look at 18, or input, we have 9 red, 8 blue, or sorry, 9, 14, 8. Is that what came down here? 9, 14, 8. Yep, we should be good. And so if we go all the way to the end, we should get 2, 6, 3. And then if we scroll all the way to the end over here, we get a 2, 6, and 3. And so it looks like we have read in all the games correctly, or at least for the very first index, but I trust that this whole entire method worked right. One of the last things that we need to do is validate every single game that we come across. So if we go up here and create a couple of constants so we can refer to them, so we can say final static int red amount is equal to 12, and then we have a final static int green amount, which is equal to 13, and then lastly a final static blue amount, which is equal to 14, and you can't forget to make that an integer. So here are our constants that we can refer to later in another method. And so going back down here, let's create a new method that's going to be isValidGame. And so this is just referring to a singular game. So public static Boolean, so we're going to just return if the game is valid or not. So is valid game, and it's given a game called game. And for here, we're just going to iterate through all of the rounds within the game. So for a hash map that is using a string and an integer pair, and we'll just call it a round, that is in game.rounds, then we'll run some checks. So we can say if the map.contains, or sorry, not map, but more so the round.contains the key red and the round.get red. So first red must exist, and then if it does, we can go and get its value. So round.getRed is greater than the red amount that we have up above, then we have an issue. That means that we don't have enough cubes to support this kind of game, so therefore it's an invalid game. So what we can do here instead is just say, we can just return false off of this. So return false. But we can't just rely on looking at red, we also need to look for the green and the blue. So let me go ahead and add that in. And so here we go. These are all of our checks. We're checking if red is greater than the red amount, blue is greater than the, oh, whoops, that is incorrect. So if green is greater than its green amount, and then blue is greater than blue. If we run through all of the rounds and we never find an issue, then we can go ahead and just return true. And we should be good to go. So now we just need to call this up here in the main method. So we can say for game, that is in games, we can say if is valid game given the game. So if all of the colors pass the checks, then we can go ahead and say sum plus equals the game.id. And so this will just sum all of the valid games up, and then we can have a print statement here at the end saying sum of game IDs, and then do a %d and a new line character, and then pass in the sum, and let's see what we get. So we run it, and we get the sum of game IDs is 2,256, and that is the correct answer for part 1 of day 2. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and conclude it for the solution today. If you enjoyed this video or if you learned anything, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed so that it can help me reach a wider audience for people who are looking for this kind of content. But again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.